special episode of Health TV from ET Health World, we have Dr. Professor Anubhav Pratap-Singh, the chemical engineer at IIT Kharagpur, who is also the faculty of Land and Food Systems, University of British Columbia. He is also the Indo-Canadian Principal Investigator, along with a team of researchers who are working on the oral insulin tablets, which is right now observed by rats in the same way that injected in insulin. So the first part of the study is making ripples in the diabetology sector, I should say. And thanks a lot, Dr. Professor Pratap Singh, for joining us today. And we would like to hear more from you about this new research which is happening. So to begin with, I would like to ask you, what made you to take up this research on oral insulin tablet? Like, if you can just give us that story, background story to start with.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. So I think the journey started during my postdoctoral study when I was holding the Banting Fellowship. And if you know the word Banting, I was holding that fellowship at University of Toronto, working on encapsulation of iron and addition to table salt, a scheme which was tested in multiple districts in the state of Uttar Pradesh, actually, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It was an effort to combat anemia. And while I was on tours speaking about that, my father, who has been a diabetic, and a number of family members have been diabetic and have to take insulin injections. So they did mention jokingly that you should work on insulin and see what you can do, how you can deliver it to the human body without actually having to inject it. So when I joined the UBC as an assistant professor in 2017, with a more free leeway when you become a faculty member to do your independent research, I did ask my undergraduate students first to start looking into it, and they helped me with a very good literature review, which was published on the topic of oral insulin and where we are currently with realizing that possibility. Later on, we hired a PhD student to start investigating the topic, and it is during this last 4-year journey of my PhD student, Mr. Ikong Guo, who actually was a MSc in pharmacy from Shanghai Jiatong University, one of the best universities in China. So we were fortunate to have him. He did some excellent research, used some of the technology platforms that we have already developed, put insulin on top of them, tried to see which areas of the body can we target. Any drug or any pharmaceutical, any nutraceutical can be delivered to the body in a number of ways. One is by eating it simply. Then there can be transdermal patches, for example. There could be a lotion, a cream. There could be sprays, like oral sprays. There could be buccal tablets. There could be other forms of pills, more sophisticated, like a number of more sophisticated techniques are also possible. So when we investigated all of this, we did realize that a lot of micromolecules can be delivered quite efficiently through the buccal membranes, and that is where we got the idea. And we made this buccal tablet. First, we did a number of in vitro studies, and someone who is not a faculty member or directly in the field of health, it was quite tough to get funding initially to do the animal trials. So first we had to prove the technology in vitro, and using like tissues. We used, for example, buccal tissues from various animals to do our test of permeability, etc. And when we were confident and had some results, we got the ethical approval to do the animal test last year. And when we did the animal test, we were actually pleasantly surprised to see that our insulin behaved in a very similar way to that of the IP injection. We had both the controls, the IP injection and also the oral taking. So the oral one is quite bad that it performs, and the IP injection is the one that we generally want our body to have as the insulin metabolism response. And when we did that, we were quite pleasantly surprised to know that our drug was behaving very similar to the um, buccal membranes, sorry, to the insulin injection. And later on, we have also posited a theory of on why it is very similar to that. And I can speak more to that as well later on. So that is the entire journey. Right now we are looking at doing after these animal studies, we are looking at doing our first human clinical trials, and so a long journey awaits trying to get approvals and fundings for the same. Yeah,
Yeah,
so that
important
is where we
steps.
are.
Yeah, now you're entering into a very important segment, I should say, human
Yeah.
trials. So, can you tell me, this pill can be taken by both type 1 and type 2 diabetes patient? Also, can you tell us about your research team effort you have put in, like the 4 years journey you have cruxed it, but more on the pill, like human trials, if you can touch upon that, like what is going to be the next few years or next 6 months, what would be the how you're going to put it for the human trials and how many people are there and what ethnic people you're taking for the research, if you can touch
Yep.
upon those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So our first phase of trials, which are currently being planned and funding being applied to, is expected to do phase 1 2 combined in a study of 24 plus 7600 volunteers. So half, like the first 24 will be healthy volunteers, and we will just try to see the safety and efficacy of someone taking these buccal tablets for a period of 14 days, let's say, and delivering and uh, getting any sort of ensuring that we do not have any bad effects. So these patients will be very closely monitored by a clinician in their office. Later on in the larger trials, we will actually look at the glucose metabolism, and it will be a longer 3-month trial to begin with. These trials are very expensive to conduct, so we are currently limited by the amount of funding. So we are expected to complete this within the next by the early 2024, if I can estimate our phase 1 2 trials, and then we will be ready for international phase 3 clinical trials, where we are expecting to recruit more than 50,000 volunteers in more than 18 countries around the world. And yeah, so that will transpire based on the results that we will have in our next phase of the study.
So initial human trials you are talking about, can you tell us it's going to be like what kind of patients, type 1
Oh yeah,
diabetes?
so like uh, in in the earlier one, we will take healthy patients and 24 patients across multiple nationalities, ethnicities, but all of them from Canada currently to begin with. So these will be healthy individuals who will take a small amount of insulin tablet along with a glucose shot, and then we will see how that is
So
behaving. And
healthy, sorry to interrupt, healthy patients means
yeah,
diabetic patients.
the first time that you test it, you cannot test it on someone who might have a diabetes actually, because we actually have a risk in testing the safety of the drug on someone who is diabetic. If we are more confident on testing it on a healthy individual. So what we do is what you do in a normal blood test in glucose, right? You take that glucose, um, um, I mean, you take the glucose solution, and then your blood level gets high, and then we will put a very small dose of the insulin pill into their buccal cavity, ask them to put it there, and then see how that small spike in the glucose level is being regulated by this small amount of insulin. And we will, at the same time, we will also see whether our excipients that are there in that buccal drugs, if they are creating any sort of allergic reactions in any individuals. So this will basically prove that it is safe now to test on actual patients. And in that trial, we are actually recruiting type 1 diabetes. Uh, um, in the larger 76 people trial, we will be recruiting type 1 diabetes patients. And they will be basically They are also expected to be mostly from Canada, but of various origins, and also various nationalities, because Canada is a very, what do you call, immigrant full country. Uh, so yeah, so those are the plans.
So, how, first it would be 24 patients who are healthy patients who doesn't have any diabetes as a history. Then you'll have type 1 diabetes patient, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So, after this clinical trials, you said like by early 2024, these would be getting over. And animal trials were how promising? If you could just give a
Oh,
few.
yeah. So as I mentioned, when we did our studies on rats, the glucose response and the metabolism that we did see was quite similar to that of insulin injection, as compared to an oral dose of insulin being given to them. So we tried all the three categories, and it was able to control the uh, insulin, sorry, the glucose levels for up to 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. Uh, 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 Now we are also experimenting currently with some other forms of insulin. There are some longer acting insulin, some faster acting insulins. So we are also trying to work with these new forms of insulin. And we have also been contacted, thanks to the media attention recently, by a few companies offering their own new forms of insulin into the buccal delivery vehicle that we have developed. Um, yeah, so once the animals took these pills, they were able to, have a good glucose level. Um and we also tested it over a period of 14 days. Um, and we did not see any allergic or negative response on any of the animals. After the period of 14 days, a small subset of the animals were also euthanized to see where the insulin is actually, ending up in the body. Normally, what happens is when you inject the insulin to the subcutaneous fat, let's say in your stomach, it basically travels to your blood membranes and then gets transported to the liver and gets stored there, kind of. And the same thing is happening with our uh, buccal pill, where the buccal pill transfers it to the buccal membrane region, and then from there the blood vessels take it again to the liver. So all of that is found in the liver. One of the drawbacks of normal oral sprays that have been developed by some other companies and organizations, uh, like other organizations have tried to develop buccal sprays, which can be sprayed onto the mouth, something like a mint fresh or something. But what happens in that case is a lot of that insulin actually gets dissolved in the saliva and goes inside the stomach. And stomach is a very bad place for the insulin to survive, because of the acidic conditions over there. So we did not see any of the insulin in the stomachs and in the intestine region of the rats, any of the buccal insulin. So that is a good sign that our pills are also working. Our pills are also actually, specially designed pills to release insulin in such a way that it does not interact too much with the saliva. Yeah, so we are quite happy with the results. Actually, it was more than what we expected to begin with, and that is why we are quite excited, and we are getting quite favorable response for organizing these human clinical trials.
So much as you are excited, we are also the whole I think the science world is excited about this new oral insulin pill, and there's so much of talk about it. And especially in India being the diabetes capital of the world, and its prevalence has risen, the diabetes prevalence is increasing. You must be knowing that 7.1% in 2009 to 8.9% in 2019, and so it's increasing this. So how much relief this pill would bring to the Indian patients? Like, it will be more useful for the type 1 patients or type 2 patients? There's so much of news coming out, how you're seeing this
So,
develop.
like, to the audience, to your audience who might not know, let me just explain type 1 and type 2 diabetes a little bit. In type 1 diabetes, our body stops making insulin. The cells in the pancreas they stop making insulin. So you have to take insulin. In type 2 diabetes, insulin is made by the pancreas still, at least in the initial phases of the type 2 diabetes, but there's something wrong with the metabolism and our body is unable to utilize that. So type 2 diabetes is generally controlled theoretically in the initial phases by other kinds of drugs. So you don't have to take insulin all the time if you have type 2 diabetes. My father, I talked about my father, he has type 2 diabetes. But over the course of, when this, and he was diagnosed in 1992 when like we were 4 years old. So like right since I remember, we have always had him with diabetes and sometimes, hypoglycemia, shock, and all those things have also happened with him. So he has been taking insulin only for the last 13 to 15 years. And the reason is why he has to take insulin, why a type 2 diabetes patient has to take insulin, is because these drugs, our body, slowly starts developing resistance to the drugs, and those drugs stop acting, and then you have to actually supplement the insulin levels. Now, our pill, anyone who has to take insulin right now has to generally take the injection. And so our pill comes into the picture where anyone, be it a type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic patient who has to take an injection, can actually now, like when it is launched in the market, will be able to take it through the buccal membranes, like orally. So it will also work for type 2 diabetes. We will plan to test it in a future phase of the clinical trial or with one of our partners. Actually, type 2 diabetic, and I did talk about the problems. So we talked about the human healthy and the type 1 diabetic. Actually, type 2 diabetic is more problematic because type 2 diabetic patients who have to take insulin generally have a very long history of living with diabetes, and their organs, other organs start getting, like, the chances of them getting affected are much more, and are more tough clinically, research wise, to clinical trials with new drugs. So we really want to be safe first, like move very cautiously, because some of the aspects might be new, and they're like just as we got some unexpected results, happy results, there could be some unexpected, findings as well that may come out. So we have to be very cautious about those things.
So you have, spoken about, why we should take these pills and what is the importance. But we were also informed that insulin pill is effective if it is kept in the buccal region, a region in the mouth behind the cheeks and around the gums. So it's like a chewable tablet, like the Gelusil types. I mean, that's how it is, or how? And can you just tell us how, if it's sitting out in the market, how it's going to be,
Okay.
how a patient has to use it? We are like
Yeah,
more.
I mean, I think, yeah, in the Indian context, actually, where you have a lot of pan masalas and history of pan, buccal transfer of drugs is very common to the knowledge of people, I think, or should be, because in that case we also have, for example, tobacco's ingredients, nicotine getting transferred buccally. So that's the same concept. So anything that you can keep in your mouth, our layers inside the mouth. So actually, even with the food, the first digestion starts happening inside the mouth. So you do have some transfers taking place over there. But the problem is we have a lot of saliva as well, and it is our tendency to like some of the saliva actually goes inside, meaning most of the saliva goes inside involuntarily. And under these conditions, we have to design a special tablet that can actually sit there for a long period of time. We did not want to make a chewing gum. You could make a chewing gum and all, but we did not want to make a chewing gum because that means people will bite it with their teeth.
Yeah, I just wanted to add up something, because earlier when you said like the other vaccines which are like, intranasal or some, a puff, it doesn't go and affect the liver. I mean, it doesn't go and sit in the liver. That's what was a concern you had said, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
is that your tablet is also, which is there in the buccal region with the saliva for so many like few maybe few minutes, is straight away going to the, not going to the stomach and going to the liver? How does that happen?
Yeah. So, we have made a special kind of a tablet, which is, and we have controlled the size of the tablet and also the shape of the tablet. It is such basically circular, but it has multiple layers in it. So only one side of the layer, which is attached to your cheek, actually allows it to go through. Um, uh, so the insulin is only will be released through the layer which is in contact with the mouth. So the insulin does not come out through the other layer where the saliva, where it is exposed to the saliva. As a result of that, most of the insulin goes directly to our system rather than being dissolved in the saliva and taken inside the stomach. So that is how we are avoiding it through a special kind of tablet that we have developed.
So, will this pill replace the insulin injections totally? Do you believe that? Like, is it going to happen? Like, whenever it's the market, and like, if you're like taking into it, which country you're expecting it to market first? Like, yeah, it's very early stages to ask these questions. I understand, but I just wanted to know out of
I
curiosity.
think it is somehow an Indo-Canadian technology from what some aspects. So obviously, India and Canada will be some of the countries that we will be marketing first. Um, Simply because we have a lot of patients also to gather in these countries. Uh, Whether it will replace the insulin injections completely or not, that is something that only time will tell, and the clinical trials. However, we are quite excited about it because we have seen the results firsthand. So if there are certain problems, we are quite confident that we will be able to overcome those problems as well. Yet it also depends on the response from the industry, the response and the feelings that the consumers might have on taking uh, a buccal pill. uh, should like I feel it should not be a problem, but that does not mean that everyone who will take it will feel so, and particularly so over a long period of time. So in any new technology, it does have its development phases and acceptance phases. It will be slowly launched into the market for sure. Also, it will depend on how the other companies and industries take it. I do hope that this media attention, if even if we are not successful, we will inspire someone else with the idea to become successful and solve this problem in the shortest amount of time that is possible. I think the technology we have proven is there, and we have the know-how. And it is only a matter of time that it will happen. I do think that the injection requirement is not a permanent requirement, and with time, and I hope that time comes in our lifetime, that we will do away with any kind of injection requirements for administering insulin.
Great news is that I have one last question. So everyone knows insulin is a life-saving therapy in the field of diabetology, and the new oral insulin pills are like is creating a lot of buzz. And can you tell us about glucose-responsive insulin? How it is like is it different from this one? And like, and in general, if you can just leave us with this note, like what are the future breakthroughs of this insulin segment itself? So we are doing away with injections very soon, and how these insulin pills itself, oral insulin pills itself, will evolve, maybe, like
Yeah.
because it's the first starting step, and there are other things also in the market. So how it's going to be in future?
Yeah. So when you talk about the insulin therapy, I think you first have to talk about diabetes, the problem as a whole. I think a lot of cutting edge research is going on with stem cells and all around the world that may just solve the problem of not having to take insulin at all. So I think those excite me much more in a slightly longer context of time than even our technology, perhaps, because it is kind of a band-aid, right? You have to take a drug every day that you have fever, for example. It is an intervention. We don't want that intervention if the problem can be cured. So I think a lot of effort should be given in that direction, and is rightly being given in that direction. In the field of oral insulin, whether our buccal pill is successful or not, only time will tell. However, I do believe that a number of other technologies are also creating a lot of buzz. For example, there's a technology from MIT, as you mentioned earlier in our conversation. It is highly likely that one of these technologies will become successful whenever we have tried to do something. We as a species have succeeded, it should be possible that we will supplant it, the insulin injection, with some of the other technologies. This is also very much needed because not only the inconvenience to the patients, but also the amount of, let's say, biodegradable waste that this procedure generates is not good for the environment. Another big concern with insulin is the cost, and a lot of that cost is associated with the supply chain cost, where you have to keep the current formulations, under refrigeration all the time. A person who has to travel with insulin has his in a train or in a plane has its own, problems of having to keep it under refrigerated conditions. So all those problems of supply chain, the cost of insulin, those also kind of get solved once you don't have to inject the insulin and have a shelf stable formulation that can be reached to a lot of to a lot of countries, both developing and on the developed side of the world. Yep.
Yeah, I was talking about the glucose, responsive insulin, like how it is going to, change. It's how it's going to be in the future. That was the added question.
Concept wise, I think it is a very, very a good technology. I can see how that is possible as well. And I do hope that we can develop those kinds of approaches to solve this problem. I think a big problem with insulin is the dosing. And if we can address that, then that will help us quite a bit. Even with our technology, we have a long struggle ahead, trying to find the right dose and how to dose it for various patients, or the right formula for dosing. I think those are my comments on the technology. It is important that it be low cost.
Okay, we hope the pills will be also affordable because major part of the countries which are affected are developing countries as well. So thanks a lot for the time. Thanks for making it and giving your insights on this research. Thanks a lot, Dr. Singh.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me here.